It's 6 o'clock. I'd like to call the November 16th, 2021 Village Board meeting to order. Allison, lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please, Allison.
Trustee White? Trustee Walter?
Here.
Trustee Shomas? Trustee Lindy?
Here.
Trustee Heron?
Here.
Trustee Bonnie?
Here.
President Coney?
Here. We do have a quorum this evening. I do know that I suspect that we'll just mark him when he gets here. Under public hearing this evening, we have the 2021 proposed tax levy process. Matt.
Yeah, so at the last meeting you announced the tax levy, and the public hearing is required because it's over 5% of the previous year that is being levied. But the anticipated actual increase is about 2.6%.
Okay. Thank you. I'd like to open the public hearing at this time. If there are any public comments on item A for the proposed tax levy. Do we have any public comments on the tax levy at this time? Going once. Going twice. 3 times sold on the no public comments on the tax levy process. And Allison, I think you have 601 on
Yes.
Mr. White. Okay. Under public hearing for the Big Rock Boundary Agreement, Walter.
We're here to accept the public comments concerning the proposed boundary agreement between the village and Sugar Grove and Big Rock. The long and short of it is the boundary is essentially Dugan Road, except where the current corporate limits of Sugar Grove extended to Big Rock Township. There are 2 flex parcels proposed in the agreement. The Scott Farm on the north side of Route 30 and the Rich Harvest Farm on the south side of Route 30. And the boundary agreement allows either of those property owners to annex their property to either community. And that's memorialized in the agreement. That's the long and short of it.
Thank you, Walter. I'd like to open the public hearing for the Big Rock Boundary Line Agreement. Do you have any public comments at this time? Big Rock Boundary Agreement. Going once. Going twice. 3 times. Okay, we will close that portion of the public hearing. Under appointments and presentations this evening, we have a CMAP pavement management study. Tony.
As the board is aware, earlier this year, CMAP awarded the village the grant for the pavement management program, and tonight we have the representative from ARA to present the report.
Excellent. Thank you. Without further ado, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Tony. And yeah, thank you everybody for your time today. My name is Joe Stefanski. I will be presenting the results of the Village of Sugar Grove Pavement Management System implementation. I work for ARA in our Champaign office, and my colleagues, Lax, Shariar, and myself, were fortunate enough to get an opportunity to work on the project. To that, thank you to Tony, Brad, Michelle, and Chris from the Village. Helped through all the emails, the phone calls, all the meetings, to provide all the information that we use to develop the findings that we are presenting to you today. A little bit of background and acknowledgements. This process started with an RFQ from CMAP as they're working to bring pavement management to agencies in the CMAP region. So thank you first to Todd Schmidt and Jose Rodriguez. Jose is with us today, who we've been working with from CMAP. And thank you to Bridget Malinowski, who is also with us today, and Abbas Kachwala from AECOM. AECOM was selected by CMAP to assist the vendors as well as bring some management oversight into the project. And then finally, ARA was selected by CMAP as one of the vendors for the project, and we were assigned to work with the Village of Sugar Grove to create a pavement management plan for the Public Works Department. So what do we mean when we say pavement management? The goals of pavement management are an objective, data-driven approach to help a community make decisions on what treatments, when to do them, and where. Pavement management stresses a benefit-cost selection of projects. It prioritizes keeping our good roads in good condition through the use of preservation activities starting early in a pavement life. This is opposed to the traditionally used worst first approach, which is essentially working on all our worst roads at any given time. So if we look at that example performance model graph in the middle of that slide, one of the reasons we use benefit cost is because we see a nonlinear relationship of a pavement's deterioration over time. As you can see with that black line in the middle of a pavement's life, cracking propagates across the surface of our pavement, water gets down into those cracks into the lower pavement layers, and through our wonderful freeze-thaw cycle that we have here in the Midwest, those underlying layers and the foundation of our structure becomes compromised. This leads to an accelerated deterioration curve, like that curve there, and ultimately costly repairs. So if you think about it, we are trying to apply maintenance later, less expensive maintenance activities before we go down that roller coaster ride, so we can protect that pavement in good condition, hold off that deterioration longer. So for the whole process, starting in that upper left-hand oval, we start with data collection across the network. We use that information to rate the condition of the surface. We use that condition information to calibrate a performance model like that example graph to predict future conditions on your network. We work with the agency to define the treatments that we're going to be considering, the budget information. We use all that information to run a maintenance and rehabilitation optimization routine. Typically that's done in software, and ultimately help you develop a capital improvement plan. So we start with data collection. For this project, we use a laser crack measurement system, or LCMS. As you can see there in the pictures, the laser information is processed to identify the location, the severity, as well as the type of crack. And ultimately, we aggregate that information into a pavement rating. And since this information is automated with some QC to gut check the results, we are able to do a 100% survey of the pavement that we drive over. And here's an example of the information that we are collecting. That right-of-way picture on the left, we're taking those every 20 feet. And the laser, the LCMS information on the two right images, we're taking that continuously. You can see the automated information overlaid on that laser scan, including the location, the distress types with straight lines there, as well as the severity. On the right image, you can see all the squiggly lines, the color identifying the severity. And all this information, all the pictures, all the laser scans was provided to the village on an external hard drive with a spreadsheet to help navigate the information. All right, for the pavement ratings for this project, CMAP chose PCI. It's a national ASTM standard. The pictures on this slide and the next few slides give you some examples of some PCI scores, what they could look like. And there are pictures of your road. PCI is in the 100, PCI ranges from 0 to 100, and you can see some subjective qualitative categories for a given PCI score. So we start with a new pavement on the left there, the 90 to 100 PCI, you're not doing too much with that. You work your way down to the 80s and 70s, that is a road that where we'd want to look at crack seal, maybe some light patching. Once we dip below that into the 60s and 50s, this is indicative of a pavement where we want to treat with those surface treatments, like a thin overlay or microsurfacing. And many times these are streets that don't look like they need attention. But this is where we are at the top of that roller coaster ride that I referenced below, or referenced before. So once we go down that roller coaster ride, we transition to the PCIs in the 40s and lower. Those lower layers of the pavement have likely lost their structural integrity, and we can no longer preserve that surface and the lower layers with less expensive treatments. At that point, a major rehab is needed. All right, here are the condition assessment results. The average PCI was about a 69. This is based on the collection that was performed this last spring. You can see the highest percentage of your roads are in good condition, but a decent amount, we see that in that very poor category, so there is some concern there. And it's important to keep track of this average from a network perspective, that network average number, so you can tell you where you're going over time, see how you're doing, see if your road program is going in the right direction. All right, so we take that condition information and we put it into a pavement management software. For this project, CMAP chose Paver. It's a nationally recognized pavement management software. We put all the network, your network location information, the condition information, age, treatment unit cost, traffic, as well as the budget information. And the software runs the analysis and outputs a plan. CMAP did offer the village a 1-year license for the software, and which, once purchased, does not expire. There's no annual fee for the software except for customer service or future software upgrades. And CMAP also provided software training, which we led for all the participating agencies, and we were happy to have the village participate. All right, some detail on the inputs to the software. This is your pavement performance model. This is how the software predicts future performance when there is no work done. This model now is calibrated using your pavement condition information that was collected, and you can see there shown as the points on the graph. All right, more of the inputs here. You can see the proposed funding plan. This was actually finalized after running and reviewing the scenario results, having those back and forths. It's similar to the current expected budget information that we programmed into the software for the current budget scenario. And you can see including some money that was set aside for preventive maintenance activities, the crack sealing, the patching, the microsurfacing. And you can see that you can vary the budget, individual years. You can vary the budget amounts for each year in the analysis, so the software is quite flexible. More on the inputs here, you can see how the treatments are chosen in the software, including how we set the PCI and roadway functional class ranges where treatments are feasible. You can see once again we're including those preventative maintenance activities there, the crack seal, distress repair, as well as the microsurfacing. Those are the activities designed to keep our good pavements in good condition. And if the pavement segment falls to a level that requires a M&R, that major M&R category that on the right of each table, but there's not enough budget that we gave that scenario to do that work, the software allows us to include an anticipated safety-related repair. You could think of it as a proactive pothole repair to carry that segment safely to that next year, and hopefully we can slot it in that next year for that major M&R treatment. All right, with all the information imported ready in the paper software, we're able to run multiple budget scenarios, starting with that expected funding, as well as others that are budget-driven, so say to increase or decrease from that expected amount, as well as scenarios that are target-driven. So say we want to know what it costs to maintain our current PCI or increase to a higher PCI. On the chart on the left, you can see the funding per scenario, how much was spent in each year. You can see that blue line representing that current expected budget. You can see the varying amounts per year there. The chart on the right shows how much was desired by each scenario for those major M&R projects, aka feasible projects, that had to be delayed because we didn't give enough money to that particular scenario's goals. So, basically, the higher that line goes, the more feasible recommended projects that were left on the table. And with each scenario comes the predicted payment condition over the analysis period. And you can compare that maintain current fund line, that dark blue line, with that maintain current condition line, that green line there. If they're diverging over time, like you can see here, that tells us that we have an underfunded roadway program and that over time we would expect the roadway network to deteriorate without additional funding. And it's important to perform this analysis periodically over time so that you know that you're on that right track, you're improving, you're maintaining your roadway network. Again, the analysis results for each scenario, this time in a table format. So for each scenario, in that first column, that's the total 5-year budget that was available for that given scenario. That second column, how much major M&R work, if any, was left out that paver wanted to do for that scenario, but again, we didn't give it enough money. That third column would be the total of those two, basically the total of all feasible projects for that scenario. And then the fourth column, that is the predicted PCI at the end of that analysis period for each scenario given that budget in the first column. So the moral of the story here, you can see, comparing that first, basically the bookend columns there, aggressive spending sooner rather than later does benefit the roadway the greatest and for less total needed dollars. All right, and here is the major M&R work plan. This is the proposed work plan. Again, this was finalized after running and reviewing those scenario results. It's similar to the current expected funding scenario that we ran. It's just, here we've aggregated the projects into more logical groupings, per year type of thing. So over the 5 years, you can see where the work is proposed on that map, color-coded by year. You can see on that chart the budget for each of the year of the analysis, those green bars, as well as the number of miles, the blue bars, that were done, which you can see does vary from year to year because, again, we have the different funding levels as well as different makeup of treatment types for the individual projects in those in any given year. All right, and here's the proposed pavement preservation plan, or the microsurfacing plan. This plan designed to keep your good roads in good condition. Again, this is a honed version of that current funding scenario. Again, we're aggregating those projects into more logical groupings. And then finally, here is the proposed crack seal and patch location. The map, we're just showing 2022, 1 year, just because there's so many overlapping projects over a 5-year period for crack sealing patching. But you can see the totals in that chart for all 5 years on that chart on the right. And I should mention that the populated paper database was provided to the village. It contains all the scenarios that we ran, so they can be updated and reran in the future. All right, here are the analysis results for that current budget spending level. This time we're looking at the distribution of the condition ratings within each of those PCI qualitative ranges for each year. So you can see the progression, from the year 1 to year 5, over that analysis period, that the total between those two green bars, I guess you could think, that good and satisfactory, it stays about the same level, but the percentage of the serious and failed roads, so the gray, the brown, that definitely increases by the end of that analysis period from the start. And, again, this supports the conclusion that we see an underfunded roadway program here with the current funding levels. But, having such a long time horizon, here we're looking several years out on all these what ifs. So, we have the time to react. We have the time to use this information for overall planning as well as setting expectations. All right, so to preface, these numbers are not from the village, they are just sampled. But what do we get from doing all of this? What we found by using pavement management techniques over the life of a pavement, an agency can save money and make their pavements last longer. The goal is to stop using that worst first approach, like that top graph there, where the roads that we work on are the ones that look the worst. So that bottom graph there, with a preventative maintenance approach, just like we brush our teeth, we put oil in our cars, we use more proactive treatments when things are still running smoothly. And doing this, it yields a lower unit cost to maintain that road throughout its life, and ultimately we're making the best use of our taxpayer dollar. So separate from all the analysis, in addition to the future predictive analysis planning, Paver also will use the distresses that were captured from that condition assessment to directly estimate the amount of eligible maintenance, the consequence or benefit of doing so, as well as the amount of maintenance per segment. And all this information can be used for planning, for cost estimating. Again, it's kind of a one-off, and it's separate. It's independent of the funding situation. It tells, gives you an overall required to address all. And then lastly, some recommendations, takeaways from the project. Definitely include and increase the use of pavement preservation techniques, your crack seal and patching, the microsurfacing is great. Keep your pavement management system updated in the paver software. Go in each year, enter the actual project work that was done that year, so you can rerun those analyses, those scenarios, and ultimately update your capital improvement plan. Consider adding structural testing to get a better idea of the health of your underlying layers of your pavement. And then lastly, we do know that our accuracy of the condition predictions is going to erode over time. So we do recommend performing a pavement condition inspection every 3 to 5 years or so. If you do all these things, we believe it will yield and support a healthy pavement management program for the village. That's all I had for today. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present.
Thank you, Joe. Does the board have any questions for Joe? I'd like to go back to slide number 1 and just say what my limited years learning about our roads and how Public Works maintains them. I feel like our staff is doing an excellent job on keeping on top of the roads, along with EEI. Together, they're doing a great job. One of the roads in your slide was crack sealed this year, so I do know that they're on top of it. And so I think you did a very technical approach. I think that the residents in Sugar Grove would agree with your assessment on what items need to be addressed next. One is Heidi's neighborhood was on there as very poor, and she's been saying that for years. So I think that came out loud and clear in your presentation. Does anybody have anything they want to add?
I wanted to ask Tony, were there any surprises with the data that they came out with for you guys? Did you know the roads and everything? Was there any surprises with the data, or you were like, yep, this is exactly what we're doing?
Pretty much.
Okay. Yeah. I was just curious.
Yeah. And so now the fun stuff begins here, I'm sure, with staff internally, and how much money we will allocate to our road program for next year. But it's very nice that we have this information. I appreciate it. It's been a while we've been waiting for it, so thank you. Yes, please.
The 69 PCI, is that typical of other communities, high, low?
So across all the communities we've been doing, we are averaging about 55 to 60. So you're above the average.
You like that?
Yeah.
And for more information, Huntley is 61 and Algonquin was 50. So those are similar communities in Powell County.
Back to what you just said.
There you go.
And then if I caught it right, you said 77 is a target. Is that kind of like
We're looking at
subjective, objective? Like, what is that?
a realistic improvement goal. It's not, necessarily it's maybe a percentile that we're looking at.
And then the other one, maybe more of a math question actually. So the budget numbers you threw in there, that's kind of like the village's projected, but that's exclusive of any grants we hopefully may get.
It would be,
Yeah.
Okay. And obviously, if we get grants, though, it may not necessarily be on the road that's the most cost effective, because every road doesn't qualify for a grant.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you. I'm sure this will be a fun conversation as we approach budget time. All right, so if we don't have anything else for Joe, we'll move on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Thank you. What's it? Yeah.
sorry, we gotta close this. Continue.
Oh.
Oh, not the way? Sorry, we'll get it out. Well, what I was gonna say, isn't there a grant program we talked about last year, where they let the road go? And then do complete overhaul. I mean, no one wants to do that, but it exists. That part not clear.
They don't qualify based on federal funds don't go to this.
Lots of bad ones. I had a second grader last year. It's bad ones this year, and it's not showing class every day. She's like we're obsessed with the paper.
Excellent. Okay, we're gonna move along to our airport report. Joe? Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you, sir.
Several weeks ago, I talked about a resident that talked about airplane noise over the airport. And in the 1980s, we signed a petition that airplanes would not fly over the airport. I did talk to Amy about that, and she says at that time she was in grade school, so it wasn't part of that, but she does remember them saying that in the 80s there was a lot of residents complaining about the airport noise. I know I went to a city council meeting sometime around that time and complained about the McDonald's jet being at the airport and the noise it made. And at that time, the jets were a lot noisier. And I don't know if the residents' complaints made McDonald's move or what, but they moved to DuPage. So, but she said that there was never an agreement. There's nothing in writing, but there was understanding that they would try to have planes not fly over the village in the 80s. But the village has grown since the 80s, and that's no longer possible. So that now the control tower tries to separate it and make sure that they're not flying over the same areas constantly, just spread them around. Yeah, they are going to fly over the village because the village is getting too large to ignore that. I bring this up because I think in years to come, with the amount of traffic, or especially pilot training, that both there's three businesses that train pilots now. It's going to get a lot noisier, and people complain more about the small planes buzzing than the jets that are here and gone. You know, they're just here for a couple minutes and then they're gone. So that probably will be an issue that we're facing in a few years. It's not a problem now, but they're growing, and it will. The next airport meeting, Steve went to for a meeting last Friday, and they were going to talk about setting up the committees for the Aurora. And I haven't heard back from them. But Amy didn't think that there'd be any meetings this year. But starting next year, she felt that that's when the meetings would be, because they're setting the committees up now. The last thing I have, if you have time, is a couple of meetings, next couple of meetings, I'd like to talk a little bit about the finance of the airport and the issues surrounding those finances. Now, it's going to take a little time. If you don't mind, I'll go on. Okay. The fuel is owned by the two major operators there. What's the name?
JAR?
JAR and
Carver, which is now changed, right? What's
Yeah.
their new name?
Right. JAR moved to Sugar Grove or Aurora because they could own their own fuel. In most airports, the airport owns the fuel. Here, the two major players own the fuel. Aurora gets 5 cents per gallon on the fuel that they sell. That's not a lot of money, and not all the airport personnel, especially the ones that fly on Sundays and that, they'll fly around and look for the cheapest fuel. So it's not a guarantee that they're going to get 100% of the fuel that's there, but they get most of it. Some of the biggest problems in the last probably 20 years has been two major people selling the fuel. There's been a lot of hard feelings and fuel and arguments over that. People taking sides of which one to buy fuel from. So it's created a lot of problems, I think, for the business, as there are business airports. But hopefully that will lessen. Everybody can accept that they're going to get a certain percent, and that'll be it. The airport gets 1.5% of the profits that businesses generate at the airport. But some businesses, like JAR, have exceptions in certain things they pay that fee on. I asked Amy if they paid it on the pilot training, and she said she didn't know. She says they know she knows they have exceptions, but she has read the contract a couple of times, and she still doesn't know what it is. I don't know what Rev, if they've got some exceptions to their 1.5%, but really it's not, the things they have, not really, they'll never be profitable with the setup they have there. Of course, it's always going to have to subsidize them. They do have, it's a pretty slim operation because Aurora has 2 employees. They're only 2 employees. They have Steve, airport manager, his part-time, and Amy is I'm not sure. I think she's a secretary. But she doesn't have any responsibilities. But I think everything goes through her office and through her. She seems to know everything of what's going on. Her and Steve make the budget, so, you know, she's been there for probably 20 years or so. And most of it, probably all I know about the airport is meeting with her for like a month, every month for the last 17 years. The last thing is, and I think her husband works as a teacher at Keeneland, Amy Mavis. I don't know if it's a Mavis teacher at Keeneland, but I thought he was a teacher at Keeneland. But I don't know.
Oh, great, yeah, a middle school PE teacher.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
They maybe maybe they had a son. They live in Sycamore.
Yeah. Well, they live, yeah.
Or Sycamore High School. Their kids went to Sycamore
Yeah,
High School.
they live in, right outside of Sycamore.
Yep.
Yeah. The airport has a 42 to 45 cent fee on the land that the buildings sit on. The FAA says you have to have the same fee for all your operators, no matter how big or small. It has to be the same fee, and it's 42 to 45 cents a square foot of the building that the concrete the building set on, plus 10-foot apron around the building that the city owns. Now the buildings are leased to the operators, and they maintain them and take total control of the buildings during the lease. The reason because the reason we put between 42 and 45% is in the past the lease was based on the cost of living, and recently they changed to new leases to be strictly a 3% yearly increase. It's easier to maintain the budget that way. So as the leases expire, the lease holders are going to raise from cost of living to 3%, and eventually everybody will be the same lease rate as the FAA requires. And that's what we do.
Excellent, thank you, Joe. So the long and short of it is they don't make a lot of money out there, and they're subsidized by Laura, and so we never want them. It's the long and short of that presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but thank you.
The growth is good, but it really doesn't pay for itself.
Right.
But next week I'll try to explain how it does.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate your time, and we thank you for your presentation.
What does an airport need to do to be more profitable? Could you ask that question?
Well,
or do you know the answer?
And no, I don't. You know, their fee schedule is set up, I think, very poorly. About a year ago, they wanted to raise the fuel fee from 5 cents to 10, and that would raise $50,000. I opposed it because there hadn't been any study of how much that would drive the business already there away, and would it encourage people like JA Air to increase their flight training school population to purchase more. So they never did a study, and they never looked into it, but I opposed it simply because although it would raise $50,000 on the books, I'm not sure it would raise that much on the sale of fuel. And without a study and talking to the people, and as a committee, we really don't have the resources to do that type of study. We don't have the economic thing to do. It would require cooperation probably from Aurora to do that type of study. So, but none of their fees are really set up to turn a profit, I don't think, at this time. They could all be raised, but they've been trying to attract growth, and so you don't raise fees when you're trying to grow.
Okay.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you. All right. Up next, we have public comments on items scheduled for action. This evening, for action items, we have the consent agenda, approval of the minutes from November 2nd Village Board meeting, approval of the minutes of the October 18th Town Center meeting, approval of the vouchers, approval of the treasurer's report, an ordinance granting a zoning variation for a garage height at 112 Meadows Drive. Also under general business, we have an ordinance approving a boundary agreement with Big Rock subject to attorney review. Are there any items, actually no, public comment. Any comments at this time on action items? Public comment, going once, going twice, 3 times. We will close that portion. Under consent agenda, would any board member like to remove an item? Hearing none, can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda as previously stated?
So moved.
Trustee Heron, and second?
Second.
Trustee Walter. Roll call, please, Allison.
Trustee Heron.
Aye.
Trustee Walter.
Aye.
Trustee Bonnie.
Aye.
Trustee Lindy. Trustee White.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you, everyone. Under general business this evening, we have an ordinance approving a boundary line agreement with Big Rock, subject to attorney review. Walter, I think we introduced this during the public hearing, so nothing more to add.
This is the ordinance formalizing it.
Okay. Is there any comments at this time from board members in discussion? I just wanted to add, I wanted to publicly thank President Hummel. It took a few meetings, and Jamie was at one of those. Trustee White was at one of those. So it took a few meetings to get this done, but I think it was a good example of cooperation between 2 municipalities. And I think that this boundary line agreement, when you look at it in detail, it really it shows a mutual respect of there's certain parcels in there that can go either way. It really doesn't matter. We're just trying to shore up some boundaries and get ready for CMAP planning and know what our place is. So I just wanted to thank Big Rock. I think it's going to be on their agenda December 1st up for approval. So this evening, what I'm looking for out of all of you is a motion to approve the ordinance for the boundary line agreement with Big Rock subject to attorney review. So moved. We got a first out of Trustee Heron. Can I get a second?
Second.
Trustee Bonnie, thank you. Roll call, please, Allison.
Trustee Heron.
Aye.
Trustee Bonnie.
Aye.
Trustee White.
Aye.
Trustee Lindy. Trustee Walter.
Aye.
Thank you, motion passes. We have a second public comment on items, on anything you want. Discussion item that we also have this evening is vehicle parking regulations. So that is up if you have any public comments for that or anything else you'd like to address at this time. Do we have any public comments? Joe?
I have a comment, but it's not on the agenda.
That's fine.
Okay.
You have 3 minutes, sir.
Okay.
Here's your clock.
It already started.
Yeah. Sorry about it. People have been telling me that some of the businesses in town are closing because of lack of help. And I know it's a nationwide problem with help. Especially people paying $20 an hour. It's really tough. And one of the things, I've talked about for quite some time is affordable housing for those people. That is, maybe you recall I wrote a letter to the editor a while back. Only in the paper one day, but people, I think a few of you might remember it. But, there has to be, for a vibrant community, there has to be housing for everyone. For the service workers, the middle class, everyone. I don't know what your plans are. I drove by a subdivision today and it says homes for the low 400,000. And I thought, well, that's not quite doing it, So I know it's probably difficult to have affordable housing for those people, but it's needed because that's the people that keep the village going, So, I hope that there's some type of thought. I know it's not easy, but I think that there's some thought and will to make it happen one of these days. So, I think it's neat. So before my 3 minutes is up, I'll just wish every one of you happy Thanksgiving, you and your family.
Same to you, Jill. And tell Barbara we said hello and happy Thanksgiving to your family. Thank you for your comments. I want to make a note to that we are constantly trying to meet with developers and entice people to come to the village. It's hard to make money if you're in the development business when you have proud landowners and they need to turn a profit. And I think that's where it comes into play. But we're working on all different avenues that we possibly can to try to get the village growing again. So thank you for your comments. Any other public comments at this time? Okay, going once, going twice, 3 times. We will close that portion. Under discussion, we have vehicle parking regulations. Chief. No, it's here.
Thank you. So tonight in front of you is a board report asking the village board to consider and discuss a couple of items. One of the things that has popped up from time to time that residents complain about certain style or certain types of vehicles that are parking in the residential lots. So this is a part specifically for residences. And one of those that has come up before in the past is permitting tow trucks to park in driveways. And community development and the police department have handled a number of calls on this issue. Sometimes the tow truck is a single tow truck, or sometimes the tow truck has an attached vehicle to it. So if you're a next door neighbor, obviously you're concerned about being able to back out of your driveway, see when you're backing out that you don't run into somebody coming around the corner or in the street, or someone on the sidewalk. So we've had in place, so community development staff, Chris and Danny and myself have met virtually and spoken about this on the phone a number of times, and have addressed some of the concerns with the residents back and forth throughout last summer and some of the winter about trying to mitigate their concerns as well as allow someone who's got a business that his only source is the tow truck business. So he utilizes that truck a long time, every day. So what can we do to assist in that nature? So we set out to look at the code, and while we were looking at the code, and just for reference purposes, in Title 6 of the Village Code and Title 11 of the Village Code, so the motor vehicles and zoning regulations, they're identical. So it was drafted a few years back to be identical, so when community development is off, that the police department can handle issues when residents call up and complain about certain vehicles, so they can be cited in one or the other, and we both have that capability. We did cite a tow operator last summer, and realized there were some loopholes that were going on. And one is the tow trucks have their own designated vehicle registration. It's a TW plate, and those TW plate is you can have from small wreckers all the way up to heavy duty wreckers, and then you're paying the state registration fee based on what the gross vehicle weight is. But that number isn't available to us as a village to determine when you're driving down the street, or it's in the parking lot, or it's in someone's driveway, what is the weight of that vehicle? So, it'd be intrusive for us to go up to a resident and say, "Hey, weigh your vehicle," to see if you qualify under the village code. So what we typically do is we utilize a type of plate, and the village board in the last 5 to 6 years assisted us and helped us create an ordinance where we didn't permit anything greater than a Class D truck plate in allowed to be parked in someone's driveway. Albeit a number of HOAs have greater restrictions in place. You can only get certain types of vehicles parked within your residence or on your driveway. Other parts of the community where there are no HOAs have more flexibility where those workers are able to bring home their cars. But just last week, the point we had an actual tractor, part of the semi-truck, the engine of the semi-truck, parked in the driveway on Melton. So Chris and police and officers from my police department have been addressing that as well. So it does happen. It's not just full trucks. So one of the things that we saw was the state of Illinois reclassified what I believe was previously known as a Class D license plate. And really, maybe if I get too technical, let me know, but if you add anything greater than 8,001 pounds of your gross vehicle weight on the truck, up to 12,000 pounds, you were eligible to get what was called a Class D, and then it's designated with a large D next to your plate, and that's how you pay for your registration based on your gross vehicle weight. We utilized, there's two of them, the 8,001 to 10,000 pound Class D, not the flat fee, there's a flat fee one as well. Somewhere in the last couple of years, unbeknownst to me, and was they reclassified that plate, I believe, to a Class C, so a new Class C, which you'll see, it looks like it's a large C on the license plate. There's a depiction on the front page of the staff report, what that plate looks like. Those are easily identifiable. So if an officer or community development or code enforcement is driving down the road and we see a vehicle with a C, it should be under 10,000 pounds. Anything greater than that, the D, F, G, and so forth, obviously, it shouldn't be parked on the driveway unless someone's doing repair work. It's a temporary thing. They're coming in and unloading equipment, or they're doing service, air conditioning service or something else, and that's not someone that's going to keep there. So our goal was to set up how can we accommodate everybody in play. We realized that the village board in the past allowed school buses to be parked on residential driveways within certain parameters, at certain time frames, 20 to 4, and also they had to be more than 15 feet from the sidewalk, and if there was no sidewalk on the street. So it really was set back further up, so it didn't block the field of vision for anyone else backing up. So for community development and us and the neighbors, we're just trying to figure out what can we do, so we thought maybe we could just go down the same path of what we have, that the board is permitted for buses, and, you know, that's what you have in front of you, is the opportunity to also besides buses to be able to park during this, the time frame, and the other requirements to also allow tow trucks, but it's up for discussion.
This is a silly question. So the front of a semi that you're saying is parked in Mallard,
Yes.
is that technically a tow truck? Because it's towing no. So how does that fall versus weight and whether it's...
That one's greater than a class. That one's greater than a class D, which is today's regulations,
Okay.
and then if we change it, obviously, it wouldn't be.
Okay, so there's no exception to the rule regarding that particular vehicle?
Correct.
Okay. Does the board have any questions for Chief? As you can see, the red line marks on the code and things to adjust. Clearly, there's a bus that exists and does past boards and approve the bus for parking between certain hours. I think 8 to 4 is what you said. I think that the way I look at this, Chief, is this is a fair compromise of what you're trying to do to accommodate the tow truck owner. That's the way I look at this. Does anybody else have any comments or feelings on amending this?
With the tow truck being allowed to be out there, is it the tow truck on its own or the tow truck with cars on it? Is that part of the weight, or is it the truck in with anything attached to it or on it?
If you also have to classify the distance from the sidewalk.
Right. So for most residential homes, to meet this qualification, you have to have an extremely long driveway. So if you have a car attached to the back of the tow truck, let's say it's not a flatbed, that car, we're going to say it's connected unless he drops it and then parks the tow truck still 15 feet up. But if it is riding up above, or we find another resident who's in the town riding up above, yeah, that could be an issue. So that's something that if you want us to look at or address, we're happy to. If they do come home for lunch, and then they go make their runs and drop it off at whatever yard they're going to. Now, however, just for clarification purposes, I want to make sure everyone's aware, they can lawfully park in front of their house or your house or a neighbor's house as long as it's permitted on the side of the street, all the way up until 2 a.m. So after 2 a.m., obviously they have to, there's no overnight parking unless they get permission for a couple of days a month.
Do you foresee that as being resolved out of the particular owner that you cited, that they'll just put it in the street after 4 o'clock?
It's that possibility, yes. I mean, it's probably more of a probability because they won't meet the 15-foot requirement. So I don't think their driveway is long enough to do it. So, but we do have other tow trucks in town that are off of Prairie 1 that does have a couple 100-foot driveway where he's operating. So not that from before he would be able to park at the location.
I guess it would beg the question, Chief, because I don't know what property this is. Does it create a greater visual impairment being on the street? I don't know if it's on a bend, having it on the street versus having it in the driveway.
It all depends on exactly on the engineering and the way the street's designed, so and which way you're coming, which way you're traveling, and then from the neighbor's perspective,
I just worry that we put something in place and it creates a different issue.
Yeah, I mean, we can't control what they put on the street today, other than what's already in place from 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. So someone can park a semi-truck on the block.
Right.
So,
But I think we're going to force the issue after 4 o'clock with this, is the point. I don't know the location of this particular property. If staff or Michelle, if we know it well, I have no idea where it is. If there's a flying corner or...
One of them's on a straight road, right? One of the original part of town.
yes. Chief, do we have anything in the ordinance about parking commercial vehicles on the street? We might have an ordinance reference that at all? No. No, has that ever been looked into? Time frames of commercial vehicles being parked on city streets?
Not that I'm aware of. I'm not aware of all the years that hasn't come up, but I'm not sure if anyone else has been staff or the board that I know that.
Interesting point, trustee Bonnie.
Other jurisdictions have a time limit for commercial vehicles parked on city streets. So, maybe something, I'll look into and see what some of the other ones have, and we can add that in, that might relieve that issue of having that tow truck parked on the street all night long, or all day long, and there's a time limit that can be parked on the city street as well.
Sounds like we have another option. Should we need to? So let's look at what Chief has got in front of us right now, which is our code. Does anyone have any concerns or any other issues you might want to address or questions you have for Chief from the way he's prepared this?
Chief, I went through this the other night. I thought it was fine. I thought it was a job. I've seen the issue, and I think it's a good way to handle it.
Yes, please, Brent.
I don't know, I should ask you this earlier. What, I have no frame of reference for what's a, Class C 8 to 10,000 gross vehicle weight versus above that. Is there, do you have any concerns that we have residents that have vehicles that are Class D or above that are kind of the regular, I don't know how big of a pickup truck or whatever, you get, when you get to a Class D,
Well, all the single rear, most of the 1-ton pickup trucks are D plates. Until this new C plate came out, but still, you said, a lot of people don't even know that plate exists yet. And if they're bought at a dealer, if it's over 8,000, they haven't played it legal.
What's your truck?
This one out here,
Yeah.
plates.
What is it?
It wouldn't be a D plate.
Well, it's because it has dualies on the back?
No, it's single rear wheel.
Okay.
Just a single rear wheel 1-ton is GUW typically over 9,000 pounds. Some of them are 10.
I don't know, if in the, F-150, 250, if somebody's pulling a big camera,
C's.
250s can fit in the C category, but anything with duals is definitely a D plate still. Because it's over 12,000 GUW, right?
That's correct. And the D plates require safety inspection too.
Correct.
Right.
The C does not. That's the new thing, because all these people are buying 3/4-ton, 1-ton trucks to put D plates on and not safety inspection. And they really shouldn't have been, because they were just used for.
And the safety inspection comes into play only if it's used for commercial purposes, but if it's for personal purposes, they don't need to have a safety inspection. So, we need visibility. We need to, that's why we're looking at certain type of plates.
So this would prohibit, somebody from having a blue park at all?
and I was going to ask the question too of, is the intent or as written, would it prevent somebody from parking it in the garage at home?
How does it sit?
I don't know. We have, we have a couple of people I know recently that have had large garage sheds in separate buildings. I don't know that anybody owns these, but that's one. Kind of the question: are you aware? Do we have people that have vehicles that this would violate that?
So a dually would violate it? I know somebody that has one that uses it 4 times a year to pull their camper. They've got a huge camper.
But do they drive it as a primary vehicle? So it's parked in their driveway?
It is.
Do they park it in the driveway or in the garage?
Every day in the driveway.
It doesn't fit in the garage, probably too
Well,
much.
Now, this doesn't, though, this wouldn't exclude those. We do have the driveway exclusion under D for people who have a camper or something. If they're loading it, not loading it, they can go to 72 hours.
Right.
That would just, a tow vehicle wouldn't apply to that, really. But that would not apply to a tow vehicle. So somebody would have to tow their camper there, move the tow vehicle, and then bring it back and pick it up later.
Well, I guess, is there, maybe I'm honest, so on this definition of tow or recovery vehicle, is that really like a commercial? I don't understand what that, is that legally distinct from somebody who has it for their own personal, is that what you're getting at?
That's what I'm getting at, so he's got a fifth wheel.
Yeah, no.
He's trying to get some camper or something.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't cover that, but it is.
Under D, somebody can have they can put their trailer in the front driveway for a limited time to load it up and, get ready to go camping, and then when they get back, to do the same thing. But, if you've got a fifth wheel or something, you can't bring your tow vehicle.
You also, number two, a lot of these contractor service vans or one-ton vans would also wear D plates. So HVAC, mowers, if they're plated properly, they're over 8,600 GBW. They could follow into that new C plate, but a lot of them are still running D plates and safety inspection. Because they're commercial vehicles.
Right, and I believe the initial conception of the law was to try to, from the village board in the past, was to keep it over 10,000 pounds and under, which is your discretion if you want to go up to it. Keep it as a D plate, it's going to go up to 12,000 pounds. That would help accommodate some of those other things. And at the same time, we still address the tow truck because we have something carved out specifically for buses and homes. If that is a thing.
I think that's a concern. I could see more and more large vehicles than you do smaller electric cars, but if you think that'll help with the residential,
Well, there's the tow truck. They're going to be able, they have their own plate, but they're still way over 12,000 GBW. But they're plated that way. Correct.
I missed that.
Well, most of the tow trucks wouldn't fit in the D plate category anyway.
Okay.
They're all 17,500, 19,500 GBWs would be plates, right?
Or tow.
Or tow. They have to wear a tow plate. The design of the truck, private tow truck would be way higher than D plate.
So, is what you're talking about, instead of capping it at a C plate, D plates would be allowed?
So then we keep it in place, there's no change then. The D plate is really taken care of, because right now the D plate is up to 12,000 pounds.
So you would be, the tow trucks would be prohibited except in buses, except for this 8-4 window, which doesn't currently exist, is that?
For tow trucks, correct.
So you're keeping section 3, item 3, on page P16 of the packet. Buses and tow trucks shall be regulated in accordance with the requirements in subsection H. So that stays in, and then H just adds the tow trucks, and that's in place, but.
Correct, everything in red, except for on number 2, the class C would stay at class D, and we'll change the equivalent, because if someone's out of state and they're not Illinois, they're not plated through the state of Illinois, they're not going to have the C, D, F. It might have a different character, or it might just be numbers. So that one. So
Tell me why we care about the weight of the vehicle.
for us, it's visual. For us to enforce it, and if there's no one around, or it would be intrusive to say we need to weigh it for a parking ticket or orange violation, we need to weigh your vehicle to see if you're legitimate to park in your own driveway. So for the visual of seeing a class.
Yeah, well, I guess my question is, why do we care how much the vehicle weighs to the driveway? Is our road, is it a problem for our roads?
It's not our road, but again, it's going to be the size of the vehicle, what we want to have, without having something in place. We're going to have what we have it now at the point, which has occurred with a guy with his tractor trailer, or tractor.
Well, then can we then, instead of saying, a weight, that if it is above, within the seat or above, it's got to be at least 15 feet from the sidewalk, that kind of would that sound a problem? Or?
There's certain parts of town that we're not going to be able to have 15 feet behind your vehicle and you're close enough to your driveway. I think we got the.
But I guess what I'm trying to do is figure out a way to carve out an exception for people who drive their everyday vehicle with a vehicle like that. Well,
I'm not, and maybe a plate might be sufficient. I'm not seeing.
Yeah, if I may, I think maybe I'm misunderstanding, I think maybe you're raising the question of why are we regulating this? Why are we regulating this use at all. And I'm not saying we shouldn't, but.
No, that was my first question.
That's
That was my first question. Why are we regulating it at all? And then understanding why, then maybe there's a way to figure out how to accommodate those other uses that I think are legitimate uses. And, you know, so that's all. I'm starting from scratch, basically.
Yeah.
What's the issue in the first place? And how do we work on it from a different perspective?
But if I understand, if you switch that to Class D being allowed, is there anything larger than a Class D that people are driving as their commuter vehicle on a regular basis, parking in their driveway?
The only thing I can think of is like field service trucks for like heavy equipment. There's one in town here.
Bucket trucks, you mean?
Well, like a service truck, for heavy equipment. Some of those guys put their trucks on like they work for CAT, you know what I mean, or John Deere.
We got a couple people that work at emergency service for the railroad that park there. They need to get out and go. So, and, so they're, is it permitted? No, but there's discretion. So some people have to have vehicles for the work purpose. We try to work it out with the neighbors and everyone else, but it does cause an issue.
I think we got somebody just down the block that's like that. He's got a nice big driveway right next to the house. It's again, this I'm trying to understand the purpose of the regulations, so we can see if there's a way to make it work.
With the exception of tow trucks and buses, has there been any history of complaint? Like, are we getting complaints about people bringing home their contractor's van or the recovery truck or any of those things that we're aware of?
No, actually, I'm gonna look at trucks. We're gonna look at your U-Hauls to whatever else that's gonna be sitting out in the driveways. Are we gonna receive complaints in both our departments to, my property values are going down because, whatever it might be.
I think we should look more towards the commercial vehicle, that road that plates of the trucks. See what other jurisdictions have done close by with their commercial vehicles. I think that's what, to me, it sounds like that's the issue here. It's not so much of the guy that has the 2500 that tows his camper. I think it's more of the commercial vehicles that are being brought home, like the semi-truck that's being parked in front of or in the driveway while the resident's home. Is that correct?
It can be so. I mean, again, it's just.
But it sounds like, though, what I'm gathering, though, is that there was a couple of examples of, when we talk about discretion, somebody works for the railroad, that technically is a commercial vehicle, so they would fall if you.
I mean, if I understand, say in the last 5 years, I'm just picking a random time here, we've had complaints about a bus, complaints about tow trucks, but really nothing else.
That's correct.
And if we really just regulated that, there's always the risk that people might start bringing other things. But I guess I just want to make sure we're not the age-old a solution looking for a problem. If the problem really is buses and tow trucks, maybe that's what we need to rethink, is really just focus on that and worry about some of the what ifs if they actually happen. I think as soon as we try to, and I get it, what we're trying to do is worry about the what ifs, but then what I'm hearing there are legitimate cases that we don't want to stop them. And I don't think we want to get into it. Well, what's the reason you have the big truck? Okay, that one's okay, but this one's not okay, but that one's okay.
Well, what about the Mallard Point semi bed?
That'd still be above the D, right? The semi would still be above the D class.
Okay.
I think the problem is we have people that are above the D.
Right.
That it sounds like people are okay with them putting those on, whether it's the person who has a recovery vehicle for the railroad or the person who works for the CAT. Those are above the D, and we're saying, well, those are okay. I don't know where we.
I think that's the problem, though, right? So then.
We knew this was going to be kind of.
Yeah, so I think we're just trying to find the solution, yeah.
From this perspective that Joe was talking about, I mean, we have a lot of neighborhoods that don't allow any commercial vehicles to be parked in the parking driveway law.
Right.
And then we have other places where it is permitted, and that allows a place for people who are in those trades to be able to live in the village and have their vehicles at home. I can see that, I mean, it's a, I've said on other things, if it's, as long as it's not interfering with somebody else's enjoyment of their property, I mean, it's.
Yeah, but, I'm sorry, just for that comment, because we had someone that was running a refrigerated truck for hours on a driveway, overnight, just keep it frozen or stored or whatever it is. So, and I think that's like one of the reasons that we came back to the board and designated the deed place. So, I'm trying to remember why we did this. It was many years ago, but there was someone running a box truck with the refrigeration on.
Could I suggest we bring it back for discussion?
That's fine. I
In
think
the meantime, certainly, if you have any specific questions with staff or anything you want us to research, please let us know. But then if you want to think about it, chat with your neighbors or friends, and yeah, right now, I feel like we need more info before we're going to propose a solution here.
well, I appreciate it, Chief. I think that it looks like we're trying to make sure that you don't have a situation where someone we're prohibiting, but someone else isn't prohibited and they fall in the same situation. And so now they're going to come back over here and say, why is that not okay? And this is, or so. This is a tough one.
I see what you mean, Chief, you want to be able to just look at the plate and know if it is or isn't. That doesn't make something that you guys can enforce equally. Right. I don't want to undo.
But what I took away too was the tow truck doesn't have a weight on the plate, so that's why the tow truck is in here. It's got, right, a TW plate,
Yeah.
so, yeah.
The only other thing I saw on the sheet that is in your, in H, not H, it's in the other one.
2.
3, B3, looking maybe at with recovery vehicle over there. It's just as buses and tow trucks, but then you have recovery vehicle on the other. Sure.
Okay, no? That's the attorney bringing you, so I appreciate you looking at it. All right. Look forward to that coming back.
Yeah. Ooh. What if they carry dogs?
Feel free, if you have it ready, and hopefully any board members can get feedback to you so that you can bring it back to the next board meeting. Okay? If you have anything to add, please get it to Chief prior so he can bring it back to the next meeting. Or keep it moving along. Okay, we're moving on to staff reports. Chief, since we're on you, let's start there.
So something new, a new item that we added that under director controls and sign prevention is we just started tracking the number of miles that the officers are patrolling the streets during the month. So it's going to be a little lag time, so it's probably going to be our second report when we see it. But during the month of October, officers put on 9,159 miles on the streets. And just in comparison, the month before, we were at 10,554. So we always see each other how many center line miles there are, and so the pavement, deterioration is occurring, but we're patrolling all the streets and making sure that our visibility is out there. But I hope that's useful information that you see in. And then obviously there's engine hours that are also included in the reporting purpose. And so obviously if an officer is sitting writing a report or sitting running traffic or just monitoring the school zones or stop signs, the cars are on, so the engines are constantly splitting the dollars. So that is new, and throughout some serious stuff, but lighthearted in the sense of the year-to-date traffic crash statistics. Just so everyone's aware, sure Grove has handled 141 traffic crashes so far this year, and 27 of those crashes were injury-related. So, grateful for where those numbers are at right now. But as we all know that our young drivers continue to be the majority of those involved in accidents. So 42% of the accidents range in age from one of the drivers between the ages of 16 and 34. So we hear this out in the news, we see it with our when we're trying to mature our kids and seeing what the rates are, but, this is proof in the pudding. 16 to 24-year-olds sort of make up 24% for sugar road property accidents. So doesn't mean they're at fault. It's not determining who's at fault. They're just involved. That's all I'm making sure clear about that. And not say that if you're young, you're going to be involved in accidents. And then just a little bit of information. The busiest day of the week for accidents occurs on Mondays. So when you're out on Mondays, be extra cautious.
Yeah, and I think you got in here and also on bright sunny days, like clear weather.
Correct.
Yeah.
So everyone always perceives it, it's got to be when it's snowing or when it's foggy or raining or whatever. But actually, you're right, a little over 85% of the time, it's when our mind is drifting elsewhere and we're thinking of all the other things and we're not as cautious or driving us with concern. That's when it happens, more accidents or other conditions. So.
I think I was surprised by the number of traffic accidents, 141, because I feel like I drive around town quite a bit and I don't see it. So, thank goodness, but still at like 141, maybe in Matt's world, that's, no big deal. But 141, he sees a little bit higher numbers, but it was interesting, Chief, to see these reports. So, thank you for sharing those. Does anyone have any questions for Chief?
Crazy, no.
I like the added statistics on it, very interesting. So thank you. Thank you for adding that info.
Excellent. Let me organize my papers here. And we'll move on to Tony then.
Just mentioning that the road program information for our program will be presented at the first meeting in December. And then the follow-up on the Dugan Road sanitary sewer analysis, we are planning on bringing that to the second meeting in December. Public Works has had a couple training classes, and progress is being made on the water main replacement project for Dugan Road for Phase Lane on the east end of the Spring Oaks.
So I spoke to Brad yesterday, or maybe the day before, and one of the things I did not know is that the next line of replacement for Phase Lane, you're anticipating splitting that over 2 separate years. So we won't do the entire project next year. We'll do 50%, 60% of the replacement.
It might be like a 60-40 or 70-30.
Yeah, not quite 50, probably a little over 50%.
Okay.
Actually, we did the final engineering for the 60, right? But we only did preliminary for the other section, and the reason why we started that was because it's an area under the creek, so it's required to get Army Corps permitting. So we wanted to figure out how we were going to cross the creek ahead of time, so it didn't slow us up for a reasonable bid time for the following year.
So did we have an engineering savings then on that, or are we?
That
we spent that was for all encompassing, and then we're going to have additional engineering
You'll
for
have
the extra 40% that remains.
You have additional final engineering, final design engineering for the second part. We only did the preliminary to get us going and make sure we were in agreement with roughing and doing.
The other thing I wanted to know, because I'm just curious, I just can't wait till the reports come, but I think it was last year, it was about 1.5, I asked staff of road, was our road budget. I think it was 1.5. Well, this past season was about 500,000, something like that. Is that kind of the process that we're looking at? That it's kind of an every other year? Because didn't we use future dollars to do the 1.5?
So in that year, we initially had thought we could use the one-time capital bill in the road program, and after it was bid and awarded, the state came out with a circular saying you can't use it. So we used fund balance at that point.
Okay.
So that money is still there. The capital bill money is still there, which is a little over $590,000. So that'll be a future road program project. We just have not received all our payments because it's over a 3-year period they pay us.
Okay.
It's 2 payments a year for 3 years to get to that total amount. Once that is, then that'll go into the road program. It just had to be for specific types of uses. Basically, it had to be bonded. And crack sealing and microsurfacing is not part of that bondable work that can be done with that money. So at that point, when we did 1.5, it was fund balance. Fund balance MFT and local. So it'll kind of fluctuate. That year that we use that money is going to be an additional $590,000. That's kind of a one-time funding source.
Okay. But you have that money now?
We have 4 of 6 payments.
4 of 6.
So
okay.
we're still waiting. That's why we projected actually for next budget.
Okay.
To have that full amount of money. We'll have one payment in fiscal year 22-23.
And I'm going to ask a question that I know Heidi is dying to know. Do we anticipate that Windsor West is up and ready for our next road program? Or
Windsor Point.
Windsor Point, what did I say, Windsor West? Windsor Point.
It is for 2023.
Yeah.
You missed that? Wasn't it
Is that, well, I didn't know what Steffi was like, this is what we're doing, even the numbers. I'm like, are those our numbers? So I didn't know if that was his, and whether we were actually going forward with that. So, excellent. Heidi, it's a good day today at the board meeting, isn't it? Excellent. Well, thank you. I think I had one other note, but then I didn't finish my thought, but I'll come back to you if it's public works related. I had a note here, and then I obviously stopped my thought on my own piece of paper. So, does anyone have any additional questions for Tony or Brad or Michelle? No? Okay. Matt, go backwards.
Nothing too much extra. Next meeting will be 6-month budget projection presentation is our tentative right now. And we'll also have a ARPA discussion. It's kind of just to bring it back to the board to discuss anything that's happened since the last time we talked. As of today, not much has happened. But we will probably discuss some of those water projects. There was just one new thing that came that basically said that the water projects can't be new water projects. They have to be discussed prior to the approval of the ARPA funds, which was March 3rd, 2021. So this Union Woods would qualify for that, but new stuff, like you can't just say, well, we got this money, we're going to go do that road if it's never been discussed or planned prior to the approval of ARPA, which was March 3rd of 2021. So this would qualify, and other things that we've discussed would qualify any of those stuff to the north side, the water tower, those things, because they've been discussed and just talk about, we can't just say we're going to go do Main Street just because we got extra money. So that's the kind of only real new thing that's come out is that there was clarification on that. But that'll be a further discussion at the next meeting.
And so the lost revenue portion that you're able to capture, is that number still, have you been able to find anything additional, or is that still roughly in the 60,000 wherever?
So the lost revenue is still around the 13,000. So it's based on periods, and you can only do up to December 30th of 2020 so far. So every year you could do that period, that 12-month period. So your first one was actually a 20-month period because the base year you use is the completed year prior to the declaration of COVID, which was March of 2020. So the full year completed was April 30th of 19. So you use that as your base year. So from there until December 31st of 2020 was the first period of lost revenue. So the next one will end December 31st of 2021. So as of right now, that number is solid. It won't change for 2020.
Okay.
But as we go through, if we have further COVID expenses, any PPE or anything like that, that can automatically be reimbursed.
and I think I saw it, and I think it was in the treasurer's report that gaming was actually at 100 and something percent.
Oh, yeah, we're projecting that almost double what we budgeted for, based on the 6-month projections right now.
So it's in case we lost revenue, right?
Yeah, and we again, and we talked about this since the beginning, is our business base for sales taxes in that period of, we didn't have car dealerships and places that had to shut down completely. We had grocery stores and the essentials that needed to stay open, so we weren't hit as much as other communities, but, so that's why we don't have as much loss revenue.
Yeah, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Is there any, I'm sorry, Matt, anything additional that you wanted to add? Does anyone have any questions?
I actually do, Matt. Before when we were talking, like you brought up in your report for cannabis taxes that we received, you mentioned 2 other funds that put the taxes in the field. I think it was water and sewer.
So the water and sewer utility tax that we was
Trying to remember what you said.
Yeah, so. Oh,
I didn't.
So way back, okay, so a couple months ago. So the one that we had discussed was, the first one was that push tax, which was 1 cent on every push.
No, it wasn't that one.
There was water and sewer utility tax that we talked about, so that's just very similar to, different like telecom and cable, where there's just a percentage based on the usage. So you can do 1%, 2%, 3% for the water sales and sewer sales of the village, but it goes into the general fund. It's just like a utility tax, just like you have for county for ComEd and.
That was the one that if we had implemented, we could get a couple $100,000 more.
Yeah, depending on what the percentage would be.
Is there what's the process for that? I know we had to pass something.
Yeah, I have not fully looked into that, so I don't want to say what the process would be.
Okay.
I could
If you can let me know, I'd like to.
Well, I'm sorry, I don't mean to put you on the spot. Does that mean you're a proponent of that, or you're just investigating?
I don't know. I think we have a couple $100,000 available that we need it.
I think everything, obviously, looking at all those things, but we go all, in my mind, it goes back to, we're trying to lessen the bills that people are paying, and hence why we did a water rate decrease instead of an increase, and we still were ahead because people were at home. So looking at ways to save our residents money versus hit them with another tax.
Then why didn't we just pass a campus tax?
It's, to me, that's a use tax on something that most of us have well, I guess this is another use tax, but that's something where you make a choice. I mean, having a telecom tax is something that we needed to operate your home business. It's a necessity, not necessarily
It's like a game, gaming.
It's like gaming, yeah. I mean, though it's a tax to me on someone who chooses to use that, not saying like for my business and my well-being, I need this, and you're going to tax me more to do it. But that's a harder pill to swallow, I think, to push on the residents. My feeling, I don't know if anybody else has an opinion about it. The revenue, it sounds like it's real revenue, but at the same time, trying to generate more sales tax revenue from spending in the village would be my first choice versus putting additional burden on our residents. Just my 2 cents. I don't know if anybody else has a weigh in on that one.
I'm not too interested in the auto water tax, which is, that's a necessity.
Yeah. But you can still go through the process just so we can see it, but I think that's that'd be an interesting, lively discussion I would look forward to. Did you have any additional questions? I'm sorry.
No.
Okay. And just so you know, when you do look at the treasurer's report, there was also revenue collected out of the state portion of the cannabis tax that we are getting, whether we have those sales here anyway, we're still taking that as part of our revenue stream. Okay. Where was I? I'm going around. I'm sorry. Are we done with Mr. Anastasia? Okay. Walter.
Let's see, what's not in my report is Prairie Point had their ceremonial ribbon cutting today, and I think by all accounts, everybody was greatly impressed with the facility. And I had the opportunity to talk to a couple of residents that already moved in there, and they could not be more effusive about the facility. They came from other facilities, and they just elated by what the Prairie Point Partners built there. The other thing that I have is update on what's going on at Deep Coat. I think the last time I had mentioned they had a problem with getting an actual gas connection and the delivery of the rooftop heating units. Well, the rooftop heating units were delivered, and the general contractor made arrangements for temporary propane gas storage that would supply the rooftop heating units. And if you haven't been out there, the tanks are out there in the parking lot, and at least the underground work has been completed. And now the issue is with NIGAS. Originally, NIGAS was telling them that they wouldn't be out there until maybe Christmas, and now they notified the general contractor that they could be out there maybe as early as next week, but they're not committing to it. So the contractor is evaluating what to do. Do they spend the money to make the propane connection, which requires modification of the rooftop heating units, only to have NIGAS appear next week or the week after, and then have to change all that stuff out again. So, it's kind of out of our hands, but that's where we're at. It's crazy, just crazy.
Is there still some work being done on the actual, I drove by today, and it looks like on Wheeler, so not on Heartland, on Wheeler. I don't know if that's supposed to be a separate entrance to the back, it's just not finished.
Yeah, that's another utility issue that the contractor has. ComEd, they relocated, this is the way the utility company works, ComEd relocated their facilities and left the pole in the middle of the driveway, and all the other utilities that use the overhead lines are still on that pole, and they have yet to relocate their facilities. So the general contractor is trying to get those other utilities to relocate their facilities so that he can remove the pole and complete the driveway.
That was the same problem we had with Listen 47. We had AT&T trying to get off the poles and get out of the way of the project.
Okay. Sorry, I asked.
They'll conveniently wait for the asphalt.
So who wants to be a developer?
Exactly.
Anybody?
I used to be involved with building houses, and every holiday, you have NICO out there giving you a double time. So they say that the work out, and they miraculously appear right in time for the holidays.
Wow. Well, that's one way.
So a lot should get done in the next.
Watch it down in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. Gosh, I'm sorry, Walter. Did you?
That's all I have.
Okay. One of the things I had on here, and I was curious if you had from your report and the detail in your report regarding residential permits. Just surprised, and I was wondering if you had if anyone's saying anything to you last year, and obviously through this time we had 10 residential permits pulled, and now this year 3. Is it construction costs? Is it available lots? Is it permit fees? Are you hearing anything?
You have a couple things. Finney Homes, they became very active last year, and they built out their lots. He has no more inventory of lots. Ryan Homes homes. They didn't begin construction as quickly as they expected. We thought that they would have been marketing the subdivision before the end of summer, and they're not going to start until December, marketing in the Seventh Ridge. So we lost a couple months there with them. That's the explanation.
Okay. I'm just curious, have we had any, I have not, but has staff had any discussions with Brian Holmes on their anticipated number? I know when they came in for presentation, they had an anticipated number of 30-something, I think, a year. So they were going to do it in 2 years?
They were expecting to be complete within 3 years.
So a hefty amount of residential permits are anticipated. I'm just curious if they have any pre-sales that we're not aware of yet, that they know that they're going to build maybe in the spring. Or...
If they do, they haven't let us know about that.
Okay. I'm just curious. Does anyone have any questions for Walter? And I'm not trying to extend the meeting, but I do have a question. As we asked 2 weeks ago, and weeks passed by quickly, but any additional information to share on the Prairie Glen? No, not Prairie Glen. What am I saying? Prairie Grove. Thank you. There's too many Prairie. We were at Prairie Point today. There's Prairie Glen over here, and now Prairie Point. What is it? Prairie Grove. And you can share and give us an update. I know. No, I can't say I don't disagree. Go ahead, Paul. I'm sorry.
I guess, the short answer is some progress has been made since we last reported on what's going on at Prairie Grove Commons, but not to the point where we're able to bring it to the board. It's been slow, very slow.
Did I know I talked to the property owner on the east side of 47. Do we know if that got amended and sent? Yeah.
The easement conversation is still moving. We don't anticipate any issues.
Okay.
We did last week, Laura sent to the property owners and the developer. The developer had said that they want to try to get in there as quick as they can to do some soil borings see what's down there for the sanitary sewer placement. So Laura drafted a very simple letter of agreement that she sent to both parties saying it's really between you two, but here's a starting spot. So they have that, and I think it was a little bit of feedback, so hopefully that gets wrapped up in a few days. We sent them, my days all morning, but it was last week that we sent them a revised proposal on the right-of-way widths and reservations to try to address their concerns, but still protect the village. We sent them an update on SSA and REA language. We owe them an update on deviations, which we had a meeting today on that, and we just need Laura's legal eye. It's unfortunate she was not able to attend the meeting because she got called for jury duty.
Okay.
So she was supposed to be part of it today, but at the staff level, we're good, but we want her to take a look at it.
Okay.
They owe us responses to things we sent them, and then help me out, Michelle, did they send us some engineering like last week you guys were reviewing?
They sent engineering last week for our review right now.
And I don't believe I guess I should say that. Do we know if they've responded to the IDOT comment letter on the 47 access?
The one where
They've not told us if they responded to it.
Correct. They haven't notified us.
Okay. And the end users are still in contact, or at least some of the end users haven't walked away yet?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's good news, I guess. Sorry, anything else for Walter? No? Okay, we will wrap it up with Brent.
Just one item I wanted to update on the future Village Hall concept, if you will. We had a good meeting yesterday, and the concept plan that is coming together nicely. The latest draft, if you will, is a two-story village hall, real close to the kind of targeted 10,000 square feet, essentially 5,000 on each floor. One change is prior versions. I think it's kind of looking at a rectangle more of a main entrance at the end. The building's now turned, so it'll be a wider building without as much depth. And then, entrance in the middle, lobby for the most part, community development to the left and finance to the right. And then up above, a boardroom in the middle, admin and economic development to the right, and board functions, large conference room to the left. It's something's going, but yeah, it was the circulation pattern in the rooms were really starting to come together. They had a hand-drawn rendering that was really cool, and I'm jealous of people that have that kind of talent. They couldn't do anything like that at all. And then they also showed, I guess I would call them concept site plans as to kind of how it would fit in the town center. And they showed 4 separate locations throughout the village, just to really show from a smaller site of 8 acres, you could make it work, to a larger site was, I don't know, 150 plus or minus. And pros and cons to all, but it was really, in the last couple of weeks, at least in mine, I made a lot of work, and it was a big change from what we saw 2 weeks ago. I know it's the normal progress, but it really, I thought that was a big leap.
Did they send you those plans that you could share? I don't know that I saw.
I think we have those, yeah.
If you can share those with the board, just so you can get a
feel of the board.
Yeah, what it looks like, and maybe you have an opinion about something.
So what's the process going forward then? We gotta pick our site and see somebody else to get involved on.
That's what we're trying to. While this is moving forward to the point where it'll have to come back in front of the board to, go through and get plans and all that good stuff. It's really about who's ready for it and where it can go. Because we have great ideas, but that doesn't mean that the land is readily available. So
I think that in another meeting or two, I think they'll kind of wrap up this effort and be able to say, okay, here's kind of a viable floor plan, if you will, and they are including budget numbers. Obviously, they don't like cost acquisition, whatever, but for the degree they can, they're putting budget numbers on it to get us there. I think there's actually a lot to do to actually get to there. Right? It's getting close to, I think, the end of this effort.
Agreed.
Economic Development Director, is there, I saw you got somebody that's applied, but did we put a window on that? Or
did we put how long are they out there?
One of them is 4 weeks, so I believe I did do put a one to kind of end around the same time. So 4 weeks from last Monday?
I think so.
Yeah, so 2.5 weeks.
And then the one that I have said just some back and forth via email saying, hey, can you tell me a little bit more about this? Or, type of thing. This is very preliminary. And then we did forward it to the gentleman in the other community we talked about earlier that's not interested in the position but knows a lot of people. So I have on my calendar to follow up with him tomorrow to see if he's been able to reach out to anybody, kind of where that's at.
Interesting. Do we know? So was it Batavia that had or Geneva had a good feedback? I know St. Charles had, but someone else that you were supposed to be speaking.
It was, I believe, Batavia.
Okay.
From memory, I don't know what else, if you remember, I don't know if I ever saw their ad, but I think that the hiring rate was higher, or twice our size.
Right. But they get a decent turnout, I guess, of applications or with what you were told.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
No. I know. I'm a little. That's all right. We'll get there. Anything else for Brent? No? Want to beat him up over anything?
that's different.
All right. Thank you, Brent. All right. Trustee reports. Trustee Bonnie.
Nothing.
Trustee Walter.
The November 4th meeting was canceled, so
That's it. Are they anticipating next month, or with the holiday, they won't even
We
do?
still have December meeting on the calendar.
They do, okay. All right, thank you. What's your name? Trustee Heron.
All right. You're still sugar up. I have to introduce Walter via this morning.
He started taking some vitamins and some memory
I was there
care.
without being there.
Trustee Frank.
Oh, Trustee Heron, please share something with us.
Last night's town center committee meeting was canceled. We're waiting on a couple of things to be ready to present the big document to all of you, the brochure. We've rescheduled. We're going to meet December 6th, so before our first December village board meeting. And that's all I've got.
Excellent, thank you. Trustee White.
Memorial for Kevin Geary is on Wednesday, next Wednesday, 4 o'clock at the Prairie Building, which is right behind Martha Street there. The memorial bench unveiling, and then head over to the Township Building for refreshments and just kind of reminiscent independent. So it's next Wednesday, 4 o'clock until about 7. Other than that,
Unfortunately, I know I'll be out of town, so I won't be able to attend, so please pass my condolences on.
Lori and Kevin's son Michael will be there.
Good. I hope it goes well. Anything else? I'm sorry.
Nope.
Okay. Trustee Lindy. You? All right. President's report. The one thing, obviously, that I wanted to discuss with all of you, and I know we talked about it the other day, but was whether you were able to find out if we have an ordinance on development process. Did you talk to Walter about that? Okay.
I have a recollection that we have something in our ordinances that allow for a concept plan review.
Don't sound familiar.
Okay, I'll take a look.
Okay. So
It
the
might be reminiscent of Nature Rule.
okay.
I
Someone
know-
has it.
Well, we allowed it in the past. I don't know if it was codified or if it was just a policy. I don't remember.
Okay, so the reason we bring this up is we have developers that are coming to staff, and I know I've met with, and I'm making phone calls trying to entice developers to come to town and having those initial conversations. And clearly we have a developer that has presented a concept plan to staff and myself, and Trustee White was there. And then we took that information and then I shared it with staff in the room with the board members. And so always the best way to have a conversation is in this space. We cannot always get the developer to come into this space prematurely. And so it's hard at times to share with them what you all think when I don't know what you think, right? So I always preface it with, I can tell you what I think, or, you know, if you're in the room, you can share what you think, and staff, of course, can share information with them. But we always encourage them to come here. I think we learned in the past that, and I, heard from Brent that some board members reached out to him, and that we don't want history to repeat itself in a situation where the whole Crown project, I think, bit some trustees in the tail because they weren't having those meetings that were completely in their. It was a proper thing to do at the time. They were trying to get information and share information, but maybe it wasn't proper. I'm not quite sure. But the long and short of it is there's lots of vacant farmland in this town, and not all of it is right for development. And what we're trying to do, obviously on the cusp of this comp plan, is figure out what's gonna work for the village financially, for all our taxing bodies that generate property tax on any of this development, and what land is available. And as we go through this comp plan, we'll find out what land is readily available, and that's where hopefully our new economic developer will be marketing. But my point in bringing it up here is, if we can't get them to come here and present to you, and I just want feedback as to what do you think is the appropriate means. I know there's some board members that are fine meeting with the developer if they want to meet with them, but I'm always leery of that if there's 2 board members that are okay with it, and 2 board members that are not okay with it, that only 2 board members are getting the information and the other 2 are not. So I want to make sure everyone's getting the information and can make decisions, and obviously we can discuss it here. But it is a challenge when you don't have a developer that's willing to come into the room, that they're in a preliminary situation and they're trying to give us their first pass. And so anyway, I guess I'm rambling, but I'm trying to figure out where the board members are. And I'm trying to find the proper protocol for these meetings, because they do happen. A lot of times with, it starts off with staff, that's where it originates. Sometimes I'm making phone calls and bringing staff somebody, and so it goes both ways, but predominantly it starts with staff. And then they're gonna wanna talk to myself on just my overall concept of the village, but also you all are the deciding body. So how do we get this information to you, and how do you wanna hear it, and in which way do you wanna hear it, so that we can be completely transparent about it, yet still it's a business meeting, not ready for public review. It is where we are. Does anybody have an opinion?
I don't have any problem meeting with them, listening to them. I think that I would be mindful of, I would be upfront and open with them that the TIF is going to be a negotiation, and we're not going to, because they're all going to ask for a TIF. They all have in the past. That it's not, we're not desperate to have things that we might not even be that excited for to come to the village, and I'm not all that interested. It doesn't seem like it's been popular in the past to have huge distribution centers near residential and right in the center of town to then create truck traffic all over. So if that's what they're presenting, I would be open and upfront with them on that, but I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to, we do need to get developers in here, but we need something that fits what seems to be the vision of this board and what a lot of our residents have been asking for.
And so I wanted to, I think what started this whole thing is I didn't want to be the spokesperson for all of you, but that's why staff was there too, is to say the consensus that we heard at having individual conversations with board members was this. This is what we heard out of board members. And if that comes across to other board members after the fact saying, well, that's not what 1 thought or that's not what 2 thought, I always try to preface with anyone I speak to, when you get a group in a room, what I am thinking about might not be what Jamie's thinking about or what Heidi's thinking about, and we feed off of each other. So I might give you an opinion today that might not be my opinion in the boardroom. And so I really do try to say that to them. But we're also getting them to, we don't want them to go, I'm very mindful of people spending dollars, and it costs money for them to put something together. And so you don't want them to spend money when the board's majority is not going to put something through. So I think that's where staff is trying to say, we have to help them, help us to get the right people in front of us. And that's what they're trying to do, to get information and share it. And when that information is shared, if someone disagrees with the information that's shared, it doesn't mean that it can't be swayed in the boardroom. This is just that this is what it was, so that they don't come in here with a thought process of, oh, I think I'm good, if they're really not. So you might not be comfortable, or someone else might not be comfortable with those individual meetings. They're necessary, it's part of the process. And I think you have to be a little bit trusting of staff, that they know, having all these conversations with board members, they know what you want, they have a good sense, that's why we have open discussion, so that they understand where this board is at. I feel like I have a decent understanding of where the mindset is of most board members. I understand that it can change, but what we're trying to do is get a project that's viable in front of the board. If it's not, we have to share that information as well. So trying to be transparent and get them here, but if they don't want to get here.
Well, that's what we have to figure out, because I mean, it's very much, everything that you ran on was transparency. Getting this stuff out in the open so that people can talk about it. And I agree with you. I really don't like, everybody submit their comments and then somebody will go through that, decipher it, and then tell them what it is, because we all, when we talk, I think we have a great board from the standpoint of being able to talk and, get opinions and help shape our own opinions based on that. And so I agree with you that, your opinion sitting there day one might not be your opinion, the next time it comes through. Or at least we, having an idea of what, might help a project be more palatable. And if we can't get them here to do that, we got to come up with something where we each have a say in it. One of the things that I think we talked about, I tried to bring up in the beginning when we got here was, having some sort of a plan for a TIF district that says, okay, we have a graduated scale based on what they want to bring. Okay, there's more value here, so we'll give better TIF dollars for that kind of a project. We're not really excited about that, but if this is all that's the property is good for, then that's all it's good for. We'll give a lesser amount, and more incentive at the beginning, and tailing off again, that kind of a thing. Because that is then something that staff can go to them with that and say, look, this is what our board has talked about, this is where their thoughts are. If you can work within this framework, that's possible. Or if you can't, then that's, tell us, and we can bring it back to the department. At least in the open forum without them having to, and I agree, without having representative developers, when you want the people to come in and see it, it could just become a bloodbath for no reason. And all of us was meant to present it and get ideas to move forward,
right,
as opposed to what else could happen in those meetings. And it's not necessarily always it's always the people who are against that show up. Because there's probably a lot of people that are in favor of this things too, but they just think, okay, yeah, things are going along, I'm okay with that, so I don't have to do it. We have to come up with something that people are everybody's comfortable with, but still being able to talk about it. Because I think that's the best part about this board that we have is that ability to talk and work through stuff.
I would agree. I want to say one thing regarding TIF though, because when you speak about a graduating scale on any TIF district that we have, that's the case. And what he's referring to is if you have 100 acres and you start in a corner, that he's suggesting maybe in this corner you give more than you would as you progress through the project because it's already proven itself, right? I think that makes a lot of sense. I think the hard part is to put that in a concept plan for staff, because at the end of the day, it's all about the use and it's all about the numbers. So if the use is first and you hate the use, you're sure enough not going to give the TIF incentive. Right. So it's just, that's the hard part of being very free with your ideas and what you think in an area. Gosh, we're just trying to get some direction on what the appropriate thing to do is. We're not, I'm as open as the day is long. I quite honestly, I have no secrets. I don't tell lies because I can never get traffic. So it's not that. It's really that there's business dealings that people are coming in with significant asks and real dollars and time spent in an effort to not waste anyone's time. Staff's time, our time, their time, and flying in from out of state, all that stuff costs money. And we want to make sure that we all can have a discussion, and maybe it's generic. Maybe it is if we get that concept plan, staff gets a concept plan, maybe we come into the boardroom and it comes on for a discussion item on a particular property, without them here and say, this is what it is, this is what we were shown, and we just discuss it regarding, they don't have any input, of course, in that discussion, and it's just us discussing that plan. So I don't know if that's, but again, it's being presented the way it was presented to us, of course, for open discussion. It's not necessarily being presented by the developer, but we would have a concept plan, we would have any dollars associated that were presented to staff, and we would just discuss that here.
When you're meeting like just one person or two people with a developer separately to a solution, you're doing that with everybody down the road. Like you said, you feed off each other. So what you say there, I've had my mind changed many times here, when I walked in the door. Also, it does present a transparency issue, and as far as not necessarily an actual one, but the
Proceed.
the optics of it is not very good. So I think here's a generic kind of here's some base information. What do you guys think? So at least you could go back to if you do it in a meeting, with the concept plan like you said, then at least you could at least go back to the developer and say, I think here are our concerns. Do you know how to address those? And so that can help them refine a little bit more.
What do you think?
First, and I know you said this, but not in so many words, is I just want to make sure everybody understands. Nothing that this board's doing or current board's doing, these meetings are in no way illegal. They're not a violation of the Open Meetings Act. There's nothing. It's more of a perception or policy. It's not a legal question that you're wrestling with here. So if anybody listens to this, not to be a lot of listeners, I don't want to think that somebody's doing something that they shouldn't be doing in that sense. I think that, we talked about this, is that, our job as staff, or especially when it's new development, is to try to fairly represent the consensus of the board. And, we always talk about, do the math, if you will. Some things require simple majority, some require super majority. And so we look at it as our job is to say, okay, you've got a project, Sugar Grove wants projects, depending upon where it is, is it an annexation, this or that, does it require 5 votes, does it require 4? Arguably, some if they require 4, but somebody's not here, maybe it only takes 3 if you did that night, but more than likely the board's probably going to say, well, we're not going to vote without somebody here. But, so it's usually they got to get to 4 or 5. And we look at it is to say to people, okay, unanimous is great, but if you want approval, you've got to get to this number. We believe, based on everything we've heard the board say ever, this is kind of your path to get to that 4, to get to that 5. Whether it's a TIF ask or how much, whether it's a land use, whatever the issues are, that's what we believe our job is. That's what we try to do. And if we think, somebody came with something that's just probably ridiculous, because years ago before I was even here, somebody wanted to put an asphalt plant in town. I don't believe there's a location anywhere in town somebody's going to get an asphalt plant. That's what we would tell them. You can propose anything. You have the right to propose anything and go through the process, but we would advise you probably don't want to do that. So I think that most of the time we can very effectively do that role. And it's hard to have hard and fast rules because situations are always different. Based on what I'm hearing tonight, I would tend to go with the kind of the board's policy is they're not doing individual meetings. If you don't think your project is good enough to present to the public, then you really need to rethink what you're proposing. But that's kind of the standard, but there can be exceptions, but you need to tell us what's the good reason why the board should veer from that policy for this project. And I can't sit here right now and say, boy, if they would say A, B, or C, I don't know what those are. And it may depend on, I don't know that you want to say you would never do it, but I don't think you want to be the expectation that, hey, I want to meet with each person individually so I can find out what they're thinking. And we're trying to work together to get something done. So I don't want this to sound the way it's probably going to, but for them to be able to meet with all of you individually, they have a lot more information than anybody here does. Right. Even if staff attends it, we have it. But you don't, like you're saying, you don't know what each other's thinking, but they do, and that's a problem. And is that going to make it the best project, or is that going to make it the project that just gets that last piece that gets that 4 votes, that 5 votes. So.
Well, can we have a policy or stating, you know, just the way we want to handle it, and it say that we're happy to meet, you know, I'm happy to meet with staff and say, once we're given a proposal on a piece of land, the policy is this. We present it at our next board meeting for discussion, and you are happy, you are welcome to attend and present it from your standpoint. If you choose not to, we're still going to discuss it from what we were told, and it's brought to our next meeting.
What if we throw in there that if they do want to have those meetings, that we, you know, we can poll everybody and see what their thoughts are on that one. You know, if you do it on a case by case basis, you know, like you did on this one.
I think the
and for the record,
if there are those exigent circumstances that they
and you may say they're not.
Right,
yeah.
right. But
you want to,
it's up to us.
Yeah, and for the record, it should be noted that I met with this developer with Trustee White. We were the only board members that were part of that meeting. The rest of the board had meetings with staff and myself. That's where those meetings were. So in no way did the rest of the board meet with the developer. So we're just trying to, like I said, I just wanted for the record to be like, oh, they were individual meetings. They were not. You're part of economic development, and therefore we had this meeting with the developer. And so that's how it came to be.
I believe part of kind of the standard would be, and understandably so, a lot of developers want to have an elected official in the room. I think it's very typical of this village president. I mean, they're so far they want to go to staff, and they'll say, hey, meet with the mayor. And I think it's good if we can say, absolutely, if you can, we can get it in your schedule, which usually somehow figure out how to do. I think that's appropriate, and I think it's incumbent on, you know, primarily myself, Walter, and you also then to say, okay, share the information we have with the board, but understand that, you know, there can't be this multiple feedback loop that effectively is the board communicating with each other outside the public eye.
Yeah.
So there are appropriate built-in limits to say, okay, there's some, you know, individual feedback, but yeah, really it needs to ultimately get driven. It's just a question of how soon. And I do think to a large degree, some projects, there may be multiple iterations before it would go to a public meeting, but there are other ones where it's kind of like, you're not, why aren't you willing to do it at a public meeting?
Right.
What's the thing that makes you afraid of unveiling this in public?
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, and I feed off other people. I'm very, you know, Jamie, you have a different background, and you know, what you say, I'm like, oh, that's never thought of it that way. And so there's a lot to that, and I guess we'll just have to continue to work through it. But just know that I'm trying to figure it out to get information to you all, so that we can ultimately discuss it. I mean, that's really what I want to do.
I mean, what do people think about, you know, if we had individual meetings and then we come together as a board, you know, talk through, well, this is what I heard, this is what, you know, and then we're not really so much just giving so much feedback individually as it is just gathering information so we could discuss it without in a more open forum.
Yeah. I think the hard part, my opinion, the hard part with that is everyone's schedules are time sensitive. And I wouldn't want to, there's got to be a place of Brad and Walter saying, there's no way this project is going to fly, right? So
I agree with that.
Okay. We're not going to waste anybody's time kind of with that.
Right.
But
yeah, I mean, that's got to be a front door.
Yeah.
And, you know, and that's, quite frankly, that's what the whole economic development directive did in a lot of respects. So, you know, he and Brad would talk quite a bit. About a lot of other things, but you know, and having a sense of what they thought that what might fly over that.
Right. And I think to a certain extent, like it or not, I think that that's what was trying to happen with this last developer is whether it was written well or not, the concept being based on what, if it's an economic developer, based on what he knows or she knows of this board, they're weeding people out and saying, these are your hurdles. As I see your project, these are your hurdles before you even get here.
Which is what we tried to do when we met with them.
Yeah.
We were very open with them. So, that's kind of, that's
Right, and sidebar to that would be follow-up discussion over the telephone is, this isn't gonna work, your numbers don't make sense, you have to sharpen it, you have to prove it, and come back. So that was a discussion I had, and said, if your ask is, whatever your ask is, the board's gonna wanna see that validated, right? And they have to be able to justify it to our constituents and say, this is what we approved and why. And so, we're just trying to get to a place of open, it's kind of it's a hard thing. It's like having a private meeting, you can't disclose the owner, or, whatever it may be. It's the same kind of thing right now, and just trying to do it with a group of people.
Again, one of the projects we're certainly talking about now, and came up at the public meeting before, was right across the street, whatever direction it would be from here. Just see what, I spoke with the main person on the proposed developer on Friday, and they said that they're still internally working on the proposal, and what they would want to bring back to the village in some format. And they said that their current schedule would be, they're thinking they would have something ready in December. We were expecting it earlier, but that's where they said they were at.
But that wasn't for this room. That was just a revision for staff, is my understanding.
We didn't talk about that on Friday, but at the prior, they had said that they didn't want to do a public meeting. They
Right.
wanted to try to.
They wanted to soften the blow one more time. That's kind of that's how I took it, so.
Right, and it just, in that conversation, kind of same thing, I reiterated, okay, here are some of the things that are gonna come up. There is going to be a concern based on what you proposed in truck traffic. So whether it's at this point or at some point, you're going to have to be a traffic study. There's going to have to be kind of based on the buildings you're proposing, if everything was the most intense, that's going to be part of the report. And that's what, fortunately or unfortunately, some people will focus on. So, to be able to say, well, what's likely? And, I try to explain to them, that's one of your big hurdles is to be able to explain what's most likely versus what worst case is, because worst case is more than likely going to get a very strong negative reaction from the community as a whole. So you've got to kind of work through that. And then some of the more basic things, like people are going to ask, if you have, trucks, what about the noise? The backup beepers, or what are hours of operation? How's that going to carry from whatever property to the nearby residential? Those are the types of conversations we have based on, what we've seen in the past. And obviously, if somebody's talking about any type of industrial use, there's been enough of that proposed in public reaction. It's pretty easy to say, okay, these are the things that you need to be aware of. These are the questions you're going to get, and be prepared to answer them. Whether they're able to or not, I can't say at this point, but I look at it as our job is to let them know this is what you're doing. These are the hurdles you got to get past. And then in this particular case, in the preliminary, there was a tip ask, and then we did have a little bit of conversation about, okay, it's kind of interesting because the gentleman I was spoken to actually said, like, oh, this is good. I hadn't really thought about it from your side. And, explaining what the village's share of that property tax is, and how little it is in the whole bill. The bill's big, but like all this, the bump goes to the village is small, and then just talking about, okay, based on their projections, this is how much the village would get annually, and then we have to look at is the impacts to the community. How does that weigh against that? And I did say, well, we get it that there are spin-off benefits, and that people who work there will stop and buy gas and will do this. Well, there are experts out there that study that, but that's not the type of information the village is going to produce. If you want to sell this project, those are the type of things you got to demonstrate the economic benefit to the community. Net whatever TIF benefit you think you're going to get makes the project worth it. So we'll see what they come back with. But that's I think a pretty typical conversation on the bigger picture stuff. That's more where I focus. Walter has to deal with that as well as the details, if you will, of it.
It's nice to have this conversation up front. Just say hopefully that we're having more discussions in here on different projects.
It's a good problem. It's a bad problem. Nobody's proposing anything.
Right,
So.
That's true. So I think I don't know what the right answer is, but we're going to continue to just, move and try to get people in this room and share information and best we can. And always open door if you have any questions or concerns, and we obviously can call each other, so there's that. Encourage communication. All right. I don't know that we solved the world's problems on that, but it was good to talk about, that's for sure. And yeah, that took enough going on with that. So I really don't have much else to share. Again, I'm with Joe, and I share his sentiments. I wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving. Hopefully you eat a lot of turkey and stuffing and then watch football, right? Isn't that the tradition? So enjoy your holidays. And what's that?
Bears.
Oh,
Bears
yeah.
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah, thank you. We got a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second roll call, Allison.
Trustee White?
No.
Trustee Aaron?
Aye.
Trustee Lindy? Aye. Trustee Bonnie?
Aye.
Trustee Walter?
Aye.
Motion passes.